What is a hit point? This is a question that I think some people will know, and at the same time, it's both fundamental to understand where it comes from for a reason that you might not expect. A hit point, and how many hit points you have, correlates to how many 14-inch shells it would take to destroy you. Navy artillery shells. A hit point refers to wargaming, not in the modern sense of Warhammer or anything what we have nowadays. Original wargaming, where people actually took ships and put them on like little miniature ships and put them onto an ocean and plotted out tactics, plotted out little war games to figure out how to defeat people in war, in actual war. A hit point is how many 14-inch shells it would take to sink or disable your ship in 1920s. Jade, this is a discussion of D&D 4th edition. It is, and that's why I want to talk about what built up to 4th edition at D&D, why it is what it is, and to start there, I am going to go all the way back to the beginning with 1st edition D&D. Because it's very interesting, and I think a lot of people have forgotten what D&D used to be. And I don't mean that as a grognard. I don't mean that as someone to go, oh, it used to be... No. I mean it from an analytical point. We need to actually remember what D&D used to be to understand what it is and where it went. The path that took it across all the editions. Because initially, role-playing had no place at a D&D table. That is a quote from Gygax, from Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons & Dragons. He didn't believe that D&D was for role-playing. Around that time, there were other role-playing games that were done for actually acting. Acting games have gone back for centuries, arguably towards Grecian eras. But the idea of making a gamification never really stuck until basically the modern era. It was always working with your friends. Maybe one person was the narrator of such, and people would just improvise act. They would take a character and they would simply act out a skit, or a drama, or a comedy, and sometimes there was an audience and sometimes they did it for themselves. Many of the acting games that are still used today, you may know from Whose Line Is It Anyway, are still taught in colleges. I've done all of the different skits of Whose Line Is It Anyway in college for acting. It's true. So what did Dungeons & Dragons do differently? Well, at the beginning, nothing in this sense. Nothing in the sense of what we see it as now, as a way of storytelling. There was storytelling, but more in the way that Skyrim has storytelling. And people will talk about this one time they had 2 dragons at once right outside a city. Or they'll talk about how some funny thing happened with a giant. Or they'll talk about some other dynamic and interesting thing about the game. Well, still fundamentally, the game is a game where you have a sword and stab people who always say the same thing. D&D was a dungeon diving game. You make 3 or 4 characters because you expect them to die off. You make a couple of characters, throw them into a dungeon, go down several levels, hack and slash your way through things. They might die, they might not, cool, whatever, if you don't get attached to them. Except that you do, because of course you do. You are playing as this character, but that didn't happen yet. In 1st edition, you made a character and picked a class. And that class represented what you did. You are a fighter. You are a wizard. You are an elf. Race and class were not separate things. An elf, if you are an elf, then you do elf things. You cast some magic, you have a longsword, you have low HP. It is a class designed as a class first, and going from there. Second edition was very similar in this fact, but second edition opened up the world rather than just going into a dungeon and diving down. You had more you could play with. There was more fleshed out parts of the world. They had some above ground regions, they had some world ideas and concepts, and something strange happened. They started to get a little bit popular. Because people liked this. Because people started to become attached to their characters. Around the time of second edition, people took this idea and then projected onto it these acting games. The idea of acting as a character involved in it. The idea of speaking it as not you, but as your elf, as your fighter, as your elf fighter, whatever you have. Maybe you have something other than an elf or a fighter. I don't know. But regardless, it was you. Checking the date right here before I say anything particularly dumb. There we go. Can I get a publication date for this? There it is. Just grabbing some Dungeons & Dragons edition dates. Good. Okay. Second edition came out in 1989. With the original being in 1974, and advanced quote-unquote Dungeons & Dragons, which is what is effectively the first real edition, being in 1977, with re-releases in 81 and 83. And then, the strangest thing possible, it got popular. It started to become popular. People started to like it. People started to enjoy the world. People started to project their own characters into it. People started to write. People started to write books about it. There had always been fantasy books. Lord of the Rings goes back a good chunk of the way, and all you have to do is look at history to see fantasy beyond that. At some point, fantasy and mythology blend. But modern fiction writers of the 90s, well, that became an entirely new angle. You see, in 1990, again, second edition was 1989, 1991. In 1990, I'm sorry, second edition. At that point, a little book called Homeland came out. You may have heard of it. If not, you've almost definitely heard of its protagonist, Drizzt Do'Urden. You see, R.A. Salvatore, a fairly well-known writer at that time, started writing Dungeons & Dragons novels. And his Dungeons & Dragons novel, Homeland, and leading into the Dark Elf trilogy about Drizzt Do'Urden, about the Drow, about things that are inseparable from Dungeons & Dragons, became popular books. And what makes that important is the inseparability. You can have dungeon dive fiction. You can have fantasy fiction. High fantasy has obviously existed for a great amount of time. It's been around. It's been there. I'm getting some clipping on that. Let me adjust my mic location. Good, I'm good. But what happened was that Drizzt was inseparable from Dungeons & Dragons. You can't have the fantasy novel be anything other than a D&D novel at that point, because Drizzt has Loth, it has the Drow, it has the Underdark, it has all of these concepts that are so rooted, as opposed to simply a town and orcs. Your Wheel of Time is not inherently a Dungeons and Dragons novel; it's just a fantasy novel. But same thing with any of the Redwall books. They're not inherently Dungeons and Dragons. You could consider them that, but they're not. You can't separate the Dark Elf books from D&D, and as such, people who were reading them, they said to themselves, wow, this world is interesting, this world is fascinating, this world is something that I could see myself in. Now, that's always been a thing. People have always imagined themselves in the world of Sherlock Holmes, have always imagined themselves in the world of Odysseus, have always imagined themselves in the world of Gore. But these new rules, these new worlds had rules, had games, had something that was becoming very quickly approachable. Something that you could sit down and say, I am going to make a character in this. I am not going to write a fan fiction about this world. I'm going to be a part of it. Is this important to talking about 4th edition specifically? It will be. It will be. Don't worry, we'll get there. I assure you, we will get there. Because we are now hitting the year 2000, Y2K, where all the computers exploded and all the banks went under, ushering a new utopian society that we all live in now. Now, I do want to say one quick side tangent. This is more because I want to tell the story, okay? But this is just a really fun story, okay? 1997, a little game you may have heard of called Fallout was being developed, and did release in the same year, in October. October 10th, actually, 1997, Fallout 1 was released, and September 20th, about, of 1997, one of the designers realized something was wrong. I believe it may have been Christopher Taylor. I'm not positive who it was. Actually, wait, maybe it was Tim Kaine. I don't know. Regardless, actually, it was probably Tim Kaine. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember. One of them realized something. They realized that leveling up wasn't interesting enough. When you level up, you just kind of get some stats. Your character gets a little bit stronger. You get some skill points you can place in things. Now, at this time, there were other tabletop games. Fallout is based on GURPS, which is the generic universal role-playing system, GURPS. It came out in 1985, which, if you're watching the timeline, is between 1st and 2nd edition of D&D. The generic system of GURPS was a system that was allowed to do anything, where you could just do anything in it. Okay, this is a tangent. This is a side tangent, but you're here for side tangents. All of Unfocused Thoughts is side tangents, and you love it. Come on, acknowledge that. Just like the video. GURPS was disapproving of Fallout's violence. Fallout is a very violent game, and allowed you to do some fairly dark things. For example, whereas in Skyrim, you cannot hurt the children, whereas in they are invincible and cannot be harmed, you can hurt them in Fallout. You don't want to hurt them, because if you do, everybody will turn on you because children are the future, and in a wasteland, a viable pregnancy is very rare. Everybody will despise you. There is massive fallout from it, pun intended. And it is a very, very disincentivized option, but it is a thing that can happen if you're using a burst weapon in town. It's a thing that you can do by accident. Well, Steve Jackson Games didn't even like the possibility of it. They didn't even like the idea that it could happen. So they pulled their support. They pulled the core role-playing system of Fallout. They ripped out GURPS out of Fallout, forcing Fallout to make its own systems. And then right before publication, one of the designers, was playtesting the game and said, man, when I level up, I just get like a dozen skill points. I just get like 15 skill points or so. And that's not really changing how I play. Leveling up is supposed to feel exciting, interesting, dynamic. How do we do something like that? How do we make that happen? Fallout 1 added perks. Fallout 1 added an entire system where every 3 levels, you got a perk that gave you something different, something that actually changed how you played, something that you could see and build toward your character towards in the future and say, wow, I want to be able to do that. Some were fairly simple. I mean, melee attacks costing 1 less action point is just a numbers game, you know? But other things, animals will not attack unless attacked first. Well, when you're in the wasteland with giant man-sized scorpions, that suddenly changes a lot about the world. Being able to get bonus movement every single turn that doesn't cost your action point resource, changes your entire mobility and how you approach every combat thing. Changing your changing your character at a base gameplay level was the idea. This is something that messes with my mental time frame. It really does. Because this idea, this concept, feels like it comes from D&D, right? It doesn't. The feats in D&D are based off of the perk system in Fallout. You see, game design is a technology. That's how you should look at it. That's how I look at it. Game design is a technology, and now we're coming headlong into my thesis for this entire video. Game development is a technology. Old plays had a section of the play called a dramatis personae. What the dramatis personae did was tell you who all the characters were, so that when the play starts, you can follow along, so that you already know who the lady of the house is. You already know who Yorick is. Hippolyta, Queen of the Amazons. Philostrate, Master of the Revels. Hermania, Ergius' daughter, in love with Lysander. This information is given to you so that you know before the play starts who's who. We don't need that anymore. We don't need that anymore because we developed the technology of playwriting so that we don't need to do that. We know now how to give storytelling its own voice. We know how to explain a plotline in the first couple of scenes of a play or a novel or a TV show. We don't need to hold the viewer's hands and explain to them every single nuance of every character so that they can drop those characters into a scene that's already pre-constructed. Now we know how to make that flow. We know how to we know how to make this sort of writing interesting. We know how to show a world and make that a character, make that a development, make that a part of the world that feels natural and interesting and right to work into the world. We know how to do perspective. In art, perspective was a technology. Think of it like that. It is not a loom, it is not a computer, but think of the idea. Think of the realization of how perspective works and how that changed art. Look at old art. Look at art after perspective was realized and people knew how to draw dimensionally. There were masterful artists before perspective was recognized. I don't know if invented or recognized is the right word, but I think invented is, because someone realized, someone invented the concept of how to use perspective to draw a character in a more realistic way, than we saw in ancient times, in prehistorical times, in Egyptian pharaoh times, where everyone was drawn flat on profile, where everybody was simply drawn entirely flatly. Well, now we don't need that, and that can still be a choice. Now drawing a flat style is a choice, not the only option. The idea of perspective changed artwork. Now all of a sudden anybody could just draw a couple of lines and change things size and draw something that would have been impossible for anybody but a master to create. Civics have a different type of technology associated with them, a technology of thought. I could even go into the Enlightenment and how the idea of ideas, the idea that ideas are a thing, had to be worked on and developed and created over time. Game design is the same. Game design is the same. We have learned how to make better games. We've used these same ideas, these same technologies in modern video games. We don't need to just write a manual that has the story. We know how to integrate the manual even in a smaller scale game. We know now what we didn't know 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago, 300 years ago, 600 years ago. We have developed and learned, and some things are evergreen. Chess is an example of an evergreen game. It is without flaw. It is exactly what it is supposed to be. It is what it is meant to be. It is complete and correct, and this new technology doesn't change the masterful pieces of the old one any more than the invention of perspective diminishes the work of previous artists. It does not, but it does change what people are capable of creating. This sort of thing is a technology. Fallout said, hey, leveling up in these games, because these games were already around. They were already mildly popular in a very small niche, but growing in popularity because of book sales and book audiences, and growing very quickly into popularity with a cartoon series, and then growing extremely quickly in popularity following that, and I will get into those. But there is a technology of game design about how to create interesting and engaging gameplay. Magic the Gathering would be laughed out of the room if it was released today. I am not kidding. Magic the Gathering, if it was released today, would be dead on arrival. Why? Because it does some absolutely ridiculous things that we've learned not to do. We now know that you shouldn't shuffle your mandatory turn resource into the same deck. Now, because you have 20% of the games where someone either draws all resource or all non-resource that are already over. A game is already over, and that is a bad play condition. That is a negative play experience for both people, but one who wanted a good fair game and the one who just got screwed over. Both sides of the coin will look at that and say, this is a terrible design. We know that we know that that's a bad idea. The only reason Magic the Gathering exists today is simply as a testament of hubris and the being a juggernaut in the industry for so long that it has the momentum to keep going. And amazing designers who've been able to do absolute magic with the system, pun intended. Trust me, Mark Rosewater is a walking god upon this earth when it comes to game design, do not get me wrong, but core fundamentally, Magic the Gathering is more random than Hearthstone. Hearthstone has a ton of random effects, but you get your level resource that you use every single turn. You're guaranteed to get one more mana crystal that can cast anything in your deck. We've learned how to make games that are better and more reliably interesting, more reliably good. And we've had some of the old guard, some of these old designers who made some of the best things fall flat on their faces by trying to use older designs in modern games. Have you heard of Artifact? Do you know who designed Artifact? Richard Bloody Garfield made Artifact, and all of the faux pas and all of the issues with it was designed by the same guy who made Magic the Gathering. But so many of the systems felt obsolete and outdated on day one because they were! Because they simply were. We learn things. We develop. We grow. In our story, we are at the year 2000. 1997 marked the Fallout release. And unless I'm mistaken, Fallout 2 was 2 years after that. Let me verify myself on that. If you're not familiar with the series is a video essay that is done on the fly. This is me expositioning a video essay with no background, no prior research, and no editing. Fallout 2 did in fact come out in 1998, and expanded on the perk system in a very interesting way. Because Fallout 2 perks took the initial idea of changing how you play and focusing on that, so that the perks are less numbers. There's less, you get more radiation resistance, and there's more unique things. Additional strength when your HP is below half health changes when you heal and when you want to heal. Things like things like getting more bonuses from reading books changes what you focus on when you're looting. All of a sudden, these books, which were moderate at best, become a god tier upgrade every time you find one. 20% to gambling puts you above the break-even line. You can now gamble for money if you stick into it. Gambling will give you a net positive instead of going to the house. These change how you approach the basic things that you do in the world. They change how you approach your character that you're playing. And there were other video games also around this time that influenced things as well. You had Might and Magic was originally... When did that first one come out? 1986 was when the first Might and Magic came out. I'm not kidding, that is actually true. Might and Magic first came out in 1986. With my introduction to it, Clouds of Xene, coming out in 1992, which was a... Clouds of Xene was Might and Magic 4, with 5 coming right alongside it as a world completion sort of thing. They were the same game, just different flips of the coin. So this development, this technology of game design, and what it meant to make a game like this, was starting to become fleshed out, something that it had never done before, combining these roles of acting, these roles of creating a personality, a persona, creating a character, creating an avatar. Do you know where the word avatar comes from? In the modern setting, I mean. Do you know where the word avatar comes from? That comes from Richard Garriott, Lord British himself. That came from what they called the player character in 1992's Ultima. Initially being called the Stranger by the end of Ultima 4, you were the Avatar, and that's how your picture on a gallery is known as your avatar. That's how a character is known as your avatar. That's how everything started with that. That all goes back to Ultima. Ultima 4 coming out in 1985. This idea that this is your avatar. This is an avatar that is yours, and you have a complex alignment system that is literally based on Buddhism. The alignment system in Ultima is based on the 8 virtues of Buddhism. Like, it really is just, love, truth, and courage, but just put into a video game. This idea was solidifying that you were the character in the fanfic. You were the character in the story. You could project yourself onto this. You could project yourself onto a character? Oh no. But what if you forget who you are? Bam. Satanic panic. Mid-90s. All of a sudden, a bunch of Christian fundamentalists stood up and said, whoa, 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 whoa. You should focus on who you are, not pretending to be a character. That could lead to devilry. That could lead to independent thought. We can't have that. This was the landscape of this period of the late 90s. And before then, clearly, but this period that affects what we're about to talk about, which is the 3rd edition of D&D, more specifically 3.5, which was the real 3rd edition of D&D, like the one that people have known. 3.5 is just a revised version of 3rd edition that is the complete version of 3rd edition. So, how did that change things? That was the point at which, irrevocably, it was no longer a dungeon diver. Now you made your own Drizzt Do'Urden. You made your own Lothar. Because yes, that had Warcraft was already around then. You made your own Strider, Aragorn. You made your own isekai protagonist. I mean, the concept of an isekai goes back all the way to a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, goes all the way back to Journey to the Center of the Earth, goes all the way back. The idea of the isekai is not new. Don't pretend it is. Dante's Inferno is an isekai. Don't at me. It is. It unironically is. But D&D now had this technology developed from other systems, other games, other tabletop games, because there were more and more tabletop games at the time, more video games that were frankly at the spearhead of this technology of game design, of how to convey information and how to build systems, was at the spearhead of all of these giants, or the giants of all of these different industries that all focused on gaming. Gaming as an industry. There's a reason that Monopoly is such a bad game. Because it's old. It doesn't have the technology of a modern game. The reason that Monopoly sucks is because it was developed in the 1920s, the 1930s. It's an ancient game. It's nearly 100 years old. Look at Settlers of Catan, a more modern game. Look at the Civilization board game, a more modern and exquisitely designed game. Look at Spirit Island, one of my personal favorite designed games of all time across any system. I would be very close to putting Spirit Island above most of the Final Fantasy games in terms of just sheer game design. It's amazing. We've gotten better at making games. We've gotten better at conveying worlds and systems and stories and giving the player something interesting and dynamic to work with. We've gotten so much better at all of this. So then why do people still play Monopoly? Why do people still play Monopoly? We have better games. We have better games of the same genre. Settlers of Catan is, in a lot of ways, just Monopoly, but better. You have less randomization, more things to consider and work on, more interesting and dynamic situations. Why would you go back and play Monopoly? Why would you play 2nd edition when 3.5 is out? Why would you go back? We have a better system with interesting feats and more balanced characters. All the characters level up at the same time now. You don't have a character at level 7 and a character at level 3 in the same party because one of them happened to be a rogue and the other happened to be a cleric. You have everybody leveling up at the same time and getting more abilities and getting more interesting things. Why would you go back? Why would you play Monopoly? This is if you've followed the RPG scene, if you've heard of Fallout, if you've heard of Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, you know why this is so relevant. You are going to already see these lines coming into place because this is core to the response to D&D 4th edition. Because why would you play 2nd edition? Why would you play Monopoly when we have more interesting things out there? Because it's what you're used to. The family all plays Monopoly when we come together on Christmas. We get everyone together and we all play Monopoly like what our family has done for multiple generations. We just do that every Christmas and we have fun. Well, no one actually has fun, but we all do it. We all play the same game. And like I said, there is chess. There are games that are evergreen. Scrabble is evergreen. Pictionary is evergreen. These games don't need to change aside from changing some of the concepts every couple of years to make sure that it's in the cultural zeitgeist. You have a good system, you just can keep on playing it. But if you have a bad system, or a system that isn't bad per se, but has flaws, you look over those flaws and say, no, it's fine. We like the old system. We like Monopoly. We like D&D 2nd edition. We like to go back and play the original Warcraft games. We like to do this. And some games are evergreen. That Mario 3 is still an amazing game, but Mario Wonder builds on it. There's so much more, so much new, so much interesting, so much that is beautifully inspired, so much that is presented to the player like a gift. But there's still pleasure in Mario 3. There's still pleasure in chess. It's a little bit harder to sell the pleasure of Monopoly when Settlers of Catan exists. It's a little harder to sell the pleasures of 2nd edition when 3.5 is out. Do you see it now? Do you see where this goes? The people who were already in the middle of a campaign kept playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Revised 2nd edition. The people who didn't want to learn the new rules still played Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Revised 2nd edition. The people who just didn't like change because they changed things, and I want my cleric to be too powerful. Well, they were actually fine in 3rd edition, but they wouldn't acknowledge it, so they still played 2nd edition. In 2008, and 40 minutes into this essay, Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition comes out. And you already know what I'm about to say. You know, you see it. You see the links, you see the connections, you see where I'm going with this, and it's starting to make sense. Because a lot of people said, no, we have 3.5. We're already in the middle of a game. We already like the system because... The next thing I'm going to talk to you about, my dear friends, is sacred cows. There's a term in game design called golden calves. The idea of a golden calf is that it is something that your audience knows and loves. It's something that your audience cares about. It's something that your audience recognizes, that is tangible, that your audience wants. And it's something that you should not keep. It's something that is bad from a design perspective, something that is holding you back, something that is poisoning your ability to move forward. These are your golden calves, idols that have been constructed, things that you feel you must link yourself to if you want to succeed because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. Final Fantasy classes: fighter, monk, thief, black mage, white mage, red mage. You can't make a Final Fantasy without those. You can't. That's the whole point of the Final Fantasy game, is that you have these classes. We know what a red mage is. We want another game with a red mage. Why doesn't Final Fantasy VI have a red mage? Why doesn't Final Fantasy VI have a monk? Well, you have Sabin, but he's not really... He can do them all magic. He can learn the same thing as anything else. He's not really a monk. He's not a true monk. Because his class doesn't say monk next to it. Because he doesn't have a class. He doesn't have what we expect. Why? Look what they did to Final Fantasy VII. All the classes are gone. All the characters are basically interchangeable. You can completely change the builds. There's no difference. There's no meaningful difference between any of the characters. Barrett and Tifa and Cloud, any of them can equip any of the strength items. Any of them can equip any of the magic items. They have all the gear is unique to the characters, but it's functionally interchangeable with same tiered gear from everybody else. It's different. They killed their golden calf. They took the expected design that everybody knew about and threw it out the window. They said, no, the idea of this class-based system is holding back our ability to tell the stories we want to tell. We don't want the players to lock in to a class-based mentality. We want them to see these people as people first. We want Terra to be Terra, not a summoner. We know this because we saw what happened in 4. You have a paladin, you have a dark knight, but that's what defined the characters, and the characters were not allowed to buck that. They had to be that. They were that. Kill your golden calves. Do it. You need to. It will help you grow. So, what did D&D 4th edition do? It killed the golden calf. It took everything that the series was built on and said, okay, this is different now. This is different and we're doing it differently. We are taking the golden calf, we are taking this idea of how you structure your level ups, how you structure your combat, how you play the game, and we're throwing it out. We are starting from scratch. You have powers now. Everybody has powers. You're a monk? Cool. You can do cool stuff. What? You monk, you can attack 3 times per turn? That's it? At level 10, you get the ability to punch things, to punch ghosts? That's not interesting. How about this? At level 1, you can make an attack versus fortitude that knocks targets prone whenever you want, because that's just a monk thing you can do. You can just kick someone's leg out from under them. Well, of course you can do that. Well, you can do that in 3.5. You can just make a call attack for the legs. That's up to the GM's discretion. That's not in the core rulebook. This is. Now all the cool stuff is right here, handing to you. Handing to the... everyone. Let me fix the mic real quick. Now you have tools, and now you have interesting things that you can do. And now wizards aren't the only ones who are allowed to be powerful, and they playtested this before. They playtested this in the previous edition. And actually, let me pull up the book itself, because I have it. I have this book, both physical and digital. I can pull up the digital one here. Where is it? Please tell me I have it right here. I can't find the digital version, and I don't want to pull out the other edition, but they playtested this before. It was called the very controversial Book of Nine Swords. Oh, this was a point of contention. Some people loved it, some people hated it. This was the exciting moment, the turning tide of D&D history. Publication date 2006. 2006, 2 years before 4th edition came out, when D&D 3.5 was long in the tooth and other systems were coming out. You had Shadowruns, you had a bunch of other systems that were available now that were publicly handled that anyone could pick from. D&D had to do something different. We already have a paladin. Oh. But let's add a crusader. It can do more things than the paladin. It can be more interesting. It'll still be the same power level, but it will have different options. Let's have a warblade. It parallels the pure martial prowess of the fighter. It does the same thing, but now it has maneuvers. Now it has stances. Now it has a whole bunch of things you can do in combat. You can do your backflip and attack. You can run around an enemy and get behind them. You can do interesting things. The Sword Sage is a monk, but it's a monk in the way that 5th edition monk is not a monk, in the sense of you can punch things 4 times per turn. Now it's a monk that can attack through the wind. Now you can anticipate your enemy's actions. Now you can you turn your opponent's strength against them and reverse the damage you take back into them once in a while. There were still limitations. But these combat maneuvers. These combat maneuvers and stances that change the core of how the martial classes were allowed to have fun. The technology of fun. Oh, it was in full swing. Oh, this is the start of it. This is when you were allowed to do cool things as a martial class. Remember that? Remember when you could do that? Maneuvers have levels. You get more maneuvers as you level up. But you don't have these spells by level mechanic. You can know any maneuver as long as you have it. No matter how many you had, no matter what you learned, you could just do them. Stone Dragon style depends on toughness of its abilities to stand its ground. Its exemplar weapon is the Great Sword. This blade was enslaved, but was crafted by an enslaved dwarf named Goliath as an act of defiance. The Goliath awarded the blade to Vashar for the first of the Stone Dragon's students, and taught them. This was a different school and a different style, and this bled into 4th edition. Now martials can do cool things. You can have fun. Paladins are supposed to protect their team, right? Paladins are supposed to protect their allies. Well, you can't really do that as a paladin because you don't have anything that does it. You can heal them, and you have an AC in the mid-30s, but what can you do to actually protect your allies? Nothing. Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Now in 4th edition, you have tools. You have options. You have a divine challenge. Once per turn, as a small part of your turn, you can mark the target. A mark means that if they attack anybody who isn't you, then they are punished. The mark is a representation of attention. You are threatening the target. They have to pay attention to you, or you can lash out at them. They're at a penalty to attack anybody but you. If they attack someone who isn't you, because you are threatening them, because you are currently in the act of fighting them, and if they turn their back on you and attack somebody else, you get to punish them for doing so. And they decided, hey, we should give this around. We should let other people do this. We should make this a thing. We should make this a thing. They should make this a thing. If you're a paladin and you mark someone, and they ignore the mark, they take damage from your deity. Your god says, how dare they ignore your challenge, and smites them for holy damage, for radiant damage. If you're a fighter and you mark an enemy, you are stuck to them, because if they try to maneuver around you, if they try to escape, if they try to attack your allies, they just left you an opening. You're a fighter. Of course, you're a master. You are supposed to be the best in your village, the best in the world, the best in every plane, depending on your level. You are a hero. If they have the audacity to look away from you and to try to attack your allies, you just get a free strike. You just get to hit them as if they had run away from you. You get an opportunity attack on them for the simple act of them turning away from you. If they have the audacity to ignore you, then they've shown you an opening. They've shown you an opportunity. You get to live the dream that the older editions of Fighter didn't have. In the older editions, you just hit things, and if someone walked away from you, maybe you get an opportunity attack, maybe you don't, in a lot of cases, because they can just get away from you without having to worry about that. Take a 5-foot step, and now they're hitting your mages, and they're dead. Now, if they even try, not only are they a penalty for trying to do it, at -2 penalty to hit anything other than you, but you also just get to hit them in the side of the head. This is cool. This is interesting. And it's different. It's unique. It is functionally unique and different. The fighter mark is a combatant staring down their enemy, looking for an opening. And if they take their eyes off of you for one brief moment, you get an attack in. The paladin defender can defend its allies because their god is watching over you and watching over the fight, and if they ignore you, and if they try to defy your challenge, your divine challenge, then your god will just simply smite them for a bunch of holy damage. Let's keep going with this. This is cool. This is amazing. Let's keep it up. All of a sudden, we have this distinguishing role. We have a defender role. We have a class of characters. We have a set of characters that can all defend, and in unique ways. What else can we do with this? What else can we do with this? How about a warden? What's a warden? It's a tree. Not really a tree. It is a defender. It is a druid? What do we do with druid? What do we do with cleric? One of the old problems in 3.5 that everybody acknowledged, that everybody commented on. Oh, thank you so much, Conley. I really appreciate that. Oh, thank you so kindly. One of the old things that everyone commented on is that druid and cleric are way too powerful. They're blindingly powerful. Because they can do anything. Do you know who the best in the game at picking locks is? Somebody who has the spell Knock. Do you know who the best defender in the game is? Somebody who can heal themselves and use a chainmail and a shield like a cleric. Do you know who the best fighter in the game is? The guy who can transform into an owlbear. They kind of have an advantage on things, right? Like, this is a lot. They can do everything. Let's take druid and split it into 3 classes. Huh? Because you can have a healer druid. That's a common thing in 3.5 and previous editions. You can have a healing druid. You can have an offensive, aggressive druid. You can have a beefy defensive druid. Let's make these different classes. The Warden is a druid. But it is the druid who is the strength of earth, the warden of the land. They are the storm and they are the tree. They are the oak that bends but will not break. Cool, I like this. All of a sudden, this druid is not just everything in nature is a druid. Now you have 3 different druids. You have a healer druid, you have a defender druid, and you have the aggressive druid. These are 3 unique classes. Cool, how do we make them interesting? Well, Warden was going to defend people, so it's going to have a mark, so they are a penalty for attacking anybody who isn't them. Okay. But we have Fighter doing that. Fighter looks out for an opening and strikes when no one's seeing. We have somebody who already does that. We have the Paladin who can also heal their allies, but also smite the enemy for ignoring them. What does the Warden do? How does the Warden do this? Well, what if they buff the team? What if they just disrupt their defenses? What if they actually just mess up the opponent? If you are a warden and somebody makes an attack that is not at you, they grant combat advantage. They give everybody who attacks them a bonus to hit them. Anybody else in your party, because guess what? You were focusing on them. You were threatening them. You were playing the defender role. You had them marked, and they had the audacity to turn their back on you, and you can grab their legs. You can push them to the side. You can lash out at them. You can hurt them and also put them off balance. Not in the way that a fighter does so that you are hitting them, just hitting them upside the head, but putting them off kilter in a way that makes them easier to hit for everybody in your party. Everybody now can jump on them. You are the mountain, and you can shake the ground to break their stance. Okay. So we have a defender who can break our opponent's stance and leave them and create openings for our team. We have a defender that can just hit enemies if they have the audacity not to lose their focus in the thick of a battle, in the midst of a fight. If they turn away for a moment, then the high noon swords are drawn and you strike them down. You have the paladin who regardless of where they are can simply offer the challenge that cannot be defied under the focus of the god. You have battle mind. What's a battle mind? Well, it's a psionic class. Psionics? Those were in 3.5, but what are they doing here? We made psionics for all of the different roles. Roles? What are roles? Well, we have a whole bunch of these defender things. We're calling it a role. Now it's a defender role. Now we also have other roles as well. Okay. But does a battle mind do anything different? Oh, it does. What does it do? Oh, a battle mind. If they hit anybody but you, if you have them threatened, if you have them focused, if you are staring them down and using the force of your mind to defend your allies, if they attack someone other than you, you create a backlash, a psionic backlash, and they take as much damage as they dealt. Literally, all the damage they dealt to the target, they take. It's pure backlash. Oh, that's cool. What's the limitation on it? You have to be next to them. You have to be next to them? Yep, you gotta be right next to them. Okay, well that does change it a lot, but what if they move? You can move with them. That's what a battle mind does. It's highly mobile. You pick one person and stick to them like glue. If they move, even if it's not your turn, you can move with them. If they attack someone other than you, you can force them to take the full brunt of their damage back onto themselves. You are the psionic defender. You are... You are the guardian of your allies by retribution. You are the guardian of your allies. You are the guardian of your allies by retribution. You are the guardian of your allies because you are the strong, resilient tree of the forest. You are protector of your allies because you are the divine paladin who is their guardian. You are the protector of your allies because you are the masterful, skilled fighter who can strike the moment an opening is visible. You are the protector of your allies, and you are a mage? The sword mage is the last one. The last defender class in 4th edition. There's one more, and it's a spellcaster. A spellcaster defender. A spellcaster tank? A spellcaster guardian? How? How do you do this? By casting shielding magic. You have protective shield magic. You don't have to be by them. You don't have to be near your opponent that you have marked at all. You can be on the other side of the map. If you have put your mark on an enemy, if you have cast that spell, that Aegis of Shielding on an enemy, if they attack anybody who isn't you, you just shield it. You just block their damage. Almost all of it. You block a hefty chunk of their damage. It is now a completely different way of tanking than any of the other ones, because you don't even want to be next to them. You want them to defy your mark. You don't want to be right next to them and in their face. You want to say, putting my mark on that person and I'm going over here. I'm going to go fight somebody else. If they have the audacity to attack, to not follow me, then they're neutered. They can't do anything. They have to follow you. Come follow me. I dare you. Or, if you want to play it slightly differently, you can take a different one, which is the Aegis of Assault instead of the Aegis of Shielding. And if they attack anybody who isn't you, you can teleport next to them and nothing personal, kid. Teleport behind them and strike them hard. Just teleport strike for ignoring you. Or maybe they just don't attack. If they try to make an attack that doesn't include you, you can just teleport them. No, really, you can teleport them and yank them away from their target, and their attack misses, because all of a sudden there's no target next to them. There's no target because they have been teleported on their turn by attacking. This is what 4th edition allows you to do. It allows you to do cool and interesting stuff on the battlefield. There is different ways of defending your party. Do you know how you defended your party in 3.5? You body blocked and hoped for the best. Do you know how you defend your party in Shadowrun? You don't. You hit them first. You take a bunch of heightened reflexes and try to get your initiative as high as possible so you can kill them before they kill you. Do you know how you defend your party in Advanced D&D? You don't. You let them die and tell them that they should have picked something with more HP next time. In 4th edition, you can guard your team in a lot of different and unique ways. They're all dynamic. They're all cool. They're all fascinating to play. But you need someone to keep you alive. You need someone to keep you up. You need someone to keep you going. It used to be the cleric. You could do it as druid, but let's be honest. If you need a healer, you played a cleric. You played a paler cleric, and you just shoved HP down people's throats all day long. What is HP? How many 14-inch shells you can take, right? We've established that? No. No. A cleric heals HP by restoring your health. But what is your HP? In D&D, even back in the previous editions, HP represents your ability and willingness to fight. HP is your ability to keep going. If you die, most DMs will have you be captured, or will have you be unconscious, or will have you be revived later, or will have you be simply out of the fight and captured by the enemy, or something. Running out of HP means you cannot fight. If you kill somebody with vicious mockery, it does not mean that you have murdered them with your words. It means that they cannot fight anymore because you have sucked their willingness to be able to engage in the battle out of them. You have stopped their ability to be in combat. That's what HP is. HP is your ability to fight. Well, you only need 1 HP because that's still enough to keep going. That's still enough to push through. That's still enough to fight. A cleric heals. We know this. That's what clerics do. They're white mages. Of course a cleric heals. That's how clerics work. You cast Healing Word, you restore health. Okay, cool. Hear me out. That just means your ability to fight, right? That doesn't necessarily mean health. There's other ways of getting someone back into the fight. There's other ways of convincing someone to fight. The Warlord has entered the class list. The Warlord is another leader. As a cleric, leader is the term they use, not healer, leader. The leader class role is somebody who can protect and heal their allies. But heal doesn't mean making them more healthy. Heal means keeping them in the fight, making sure that they are willing to fight, keeping them enraged, keeping them focused, keeping them primed, keeping them prepped, keeping them excited, keeping them in the fight. The Warlord is a martial healer. It heals not by casting a spell to close your wounds. It heals, quote unquote, because what it does is you tell them to rub some dirt on it and get back in the fight. You are a drill sergeant. You say, stand up, we need to fight now. You are not allowed to die yet because we need to get back in there and fight. You stop people from running out of HP. HP represents your ability to fight. You stop people from running out of the ability to fight. Your heal is literally called Inspiring Word. You call out to a wounded ally, and you offer inspiring words of courage and determination that helps them stand up and get back in the fight. You are restoring their ability to fight. You are not a mage. You are a frontline fighter because a good general leads from the front. You are in there in heavy armor with a battle mace the way that a warrior cleric would be in 3.5. You are on the front line fighting, kicking people away from you and into your allies, hitting them in the shins to knock them over to create an opening for your team. You are there on the front line, telling your allies to hit them harder and giving them buffs that will let them do so. You are a healer because you are the one who can help your allies realize it's not time to give up. This is what 4th edition does. It makes this concept more dynamic. It takes the idea of I can heal and says, no, it's not just I can close your wounds with magic. I am not a little twink with a magic wand that can say your wounds are now healed. Congratulations. You can be a grizzled dwarf fighter who is on the front line of the battlefield, grunting out orders and telling people to hold the line. This is a healer. This is a leader. Leader is the role they gave people who restore HP, who restore people's willingness to fight. Bard is a healer. Of course it is. I mean, yeah. Who better to inspire the team? Who better to invigorate them? Who better to help a team and support them? That's what a bard does. You play your music, you play your lute, and you get your team ready for battle. You buff them, you give them support. And you can also inspire them. Majestic words. You utter words laden with preternatural inspiration, restoring your allies' stamina and making wounds seem insignificant. It does not heal them. It makes the wounds seem insignificant. It makes wounds seem insignificant. You fight through it. You are willing to fight through it. You are willing to keep going because of the bard's inspiration. You are willing to push through and fight because you have a bard at your back. And the bard doesn't have to be a cute girl with a lute. It can be a half orc with a war drum, but pounding out a thunderous beat across the battlefield, matching your marching rhythm. It can be this giant creature thumping at a giant war drum, calling out people in the similar way to a warlord, and just saying, "We are fighting now. Let's go." It can be an acrobat. It can be something else. It can be different. Druid was split into 3 classes. A lot of people hated this. A lot of people were angry. A lot of people pushed back because this isn't what they were used to. This was killing a golden calf. This wasn't the game that they're used to. Shaman is a leader. Druid, you have a spirit companion that bolsters your allies. You don't exactly heal. You have a small, incorporeal spirit that runs around in the battlefield. A little fox jumping up and down and going near your allies, nudging them with its nose and closing their wounds. You are a healer druid, a naturalist healer. You are not what the classic druid, but you are absolutely what many druids did in 3.5, which is take the feat to take a familiar and cast healing touch through your familiar. That was how druids were healers in 3.5. You took a familiar and you cast touch-based heal spells, which were some of the best ones, and cast them through your familiar. Now that's its own class. That's an entire new specialty. Now you have an entire class based around that idea. It's amazing. It's so cool. Your healing spirit can heal your allies, and it can also support them. It can also give them flanking or give them buffs. Or you cast, instead of casting some of your spells through a familiar, now the shaman simply is a spirit, one who directs the spirits, one who directs these spirits of the land and the spirit companions. It is now a caster, but it's casting these ghosts, spirits, creatures, incantations, familiars, primal spirits of nature. They're casting the spells, not you. You see, with a shaman, you need this familiar because that's what casts your spells. You simply direct it and guide it. This is the shaman. This is the healer druid. This is the primal natural role for the druid, given its own class. Given its own unique class, its own new way to do it, your own new way to play the game. Now you have a healer druid as a separate class. They also made a psionic healer. They also made a rune priest as another healer. They also made they also took the artificer and turned it into a healer. The artificer as a leader takes concoctions and brews and effectively throws magic potions at your allies in water balloons, splashing them with healing residue that helps close their wounds. You splash your allies with Bacta from those Bacta tanks in Star Wars and heal them. You also craft them out of combat, meaning that you can have them ready to go before combat. You handle it differently. You can throw this restorative grenade at people. I've covered the leader and the defender all of them. I've taken a brief look at every single one of them, and that's half of them. I haven't even touched on the others. We still have Ranger, and for the first time in D&D history and future, Ranger was allowed to have its own personality. They doubled down on the idea of Drist. Who is Drist? Drist is the Ranger. He doesn't cast a lot of spells, not really. He is a dual weapon wielder. He is a longbow user. He is a beastmaster fighting alongside his panther companion, whose name eludes me right now. I need to look this up, actually. That's right, Guinevere. You fight alongside your panther companion, Guinevere. And this is the fantasy of the Ranger. Its different sets are all martial. You don't all of a sudden find yourself only useful because of your support class. You are not just a worst fighter, because if you give a 3.5 fighter a bow, they are a better ranger than a ranger. In 4th edition, Ranger is its own class for the first time in history and future of D&D. You can knock 2 arrows per turn. You can pin somebody's clothes to the ground to stop them from moving. You can direct yourself and your creature to coordinate an attack that knocks an enemy down and then cuts them open. You can... you can do cool things! You're allowed to do cool things! You're allowed to do interesting things! What do you do on your turn in 3.5? I hit the color enemy with my enchantment weapon. Let me roll a d20. I hit the red wyvern with my magic sword. I hit the purple worm with my blessed scythe. I hit the brown alligator with my fist. What does a ranger do in 4th edition? If you have a thrown weapon, you can throw your weapon at your opponent and then charge them and strike with another weapon. If you have, in 4th edition, you can throw up a flurry of blades and give yourself a bonus to your armor because you are spinning and rapidly attacking with 2 melee weapons. You can take the time to knock an arrow and focus all of your effort to give yourself an aiming bonus to attack. You can knock 2 attacks to do some of the most damage that you can do with a basic attack in the game. These are all at wills. These are all things you can just do. These are free. These are all just things that you can do every turn. And you also have encounter powers. Encounter powers? Is that like an MMO cooldown? No. It's like... No, it's like a movie. Voltron can only form Blazing Sword once per episode. The Power Rangers can only turn into the Megazord once per episode. 4th edition is cinematic, not video gamey. 4th edition is cinematic. What does that mean? It means that there are things that you can only do once in a while, but that are very stylish and cool. You can, as a fighter, you can grab people and pin them to the ground. As a ranger, you can attack 2 extra times on a turn. As a warlock, you have your spells that are encounter spells, because guess what? The classes are unified. The classes now are functioning off of the same systems. These things that I'm saying about all these abilities that Ranger has, guess what? Those are the same as spells. Now we've killed another of the old calves, the golden calves, the Vancian magic system. You have so many spell slots per day, and you need to take a nappy nap before you can get them back. You have a whole bunch of elves who drop all of their spells and then rest for 4 hours every 4 hours and 30 minutes. They are just refreshing their spells. Now wizards have their cantrips, their phantom bolts, their magic missiles, their thunder waves. They have these cantrips that they can cast unlimited, but all of a sudden their big spells are now encounter powers. You can build this up. You can build up these encounter powers and use them once per encounter. Vita Repulsa only makes her monster grow once per encounter. All of a sudden, several of these iconic spells are now encounter or daily powers, things that you can only do once in a while. Your Acid Arrow, now it is a daily power. You get to use it once per day instead of a set number of spell slots, and as you level up, you get more spells and more spell slots, but you still are restricted to the same thing. Spellcasters are restricted to the same action set as everybody else. Wizards have at-wills, encounters, and dailies, but so do fighters. All of a sudden, the fighter daily power of I'm going to break your knees and you're going to be immobilized until you get healed, which is actually a power that you can use if you have an axe, hammer, or mace. It deals twice double your weapon damage, and they are either slowed or immobilized depending on their save. Like, you can break their legs as a fighter, but that's a big moment. Think of a book. Think of a novel. You can only do that kind of thing once in a while, otherwise the encounters of the novel are not interesting. All of a sudden, that Wheel of Time battle is not as interesting. You can only have the Wolf Boy go berserk once per encounter. You can only have the guy with an unbreakable luck elemental at his side do something dynamic and flourishing once per encounter. All of a sudden, everyone follows the same rules, and the idea of wizard supremacy is over because now wizards follow the same rules as everybody else. Isn't that terrible? Isn't that horrible? People hated it because they wanted wizards to be better. They're wizards. They're the fantasy of the wizard. They should be stronger than the fighter. Why? The fantasy of the fighter is the fantasy of the martial master, the longsword expert who can destroy anybody one-on-one, the whirling halberdier who can take on an army, the dynasty warrior's battle axe, the rapier fighter who can seek out a point. Is that fantasy any less important than the fantasy of the sorcerer, of the wizard, of the rogue? I mean, Rogue does the same thing it always has done, but Rogue has always been closer to a spellcaster just because it actually gets to do a sneak attack. It actually gets to do something more interesting. It gets to do something more interesting. It gets to do something more interesting. It gets to do something interesting. All the classes are still around. Several of the iconic spells and abilities and things are still around. You still have your sneak attack. You still have Fireball. Fireball is still amazing. But now you can only cast it once per encounter because it's an encounter power. And of course you can only cast it once per encounter because why would you Lena Inverse cast Dragon Slave multiple times per encounter? No, it's a big finisher. That's the end of the battle. That's how the battle ends. You don't get to pull out your Ragna Blade more than once per story arc. You don't get to do the ultra cool thing all the time where it stops being interesting. You don't get to fireball every enemy. People didn't like that. People hated that. People were mad. How dare they take that from wizard? How dare they take that from sorcerer? How dare they take away my cleric's power? Cleric is a divine leader that can heal. Paladin is a divine defender that can protect. Avenger is a divine striker, is the name. A striker role. Strikers are now the name for the class role of those who can attack enemies, of those who focus on dishing out damage, of the aggressive ones, the ones who are there to just slaughter, the ones who are there to let blood. The fighter is not. The fighter is a defender, but the ranger, the rogue, the warlock, those are your strikers. Those are the ones who are putting up damage. Those are the ones who are aggressive, cursing enemies and hunting them down. The Avenger is the hand of your god. The Avenger is the blade of divinity. Your God guides your hand every time that you attack your enemy that you have made an oath against. You get to roll twice and use either result, because you are the divine blade of your God, and woe be upon any who should hold you back. You are inspired. You will cut them down. It's inevitable. It is a divine, an aggressive divine. It is the fanatic. It is the oath. It is this devastation, this aggressive angle that divinity has historically had. I mean, there's been crusades and jihads all throughout history. There has always been this idea of religion as somebody who is going to weed out those who don't follow them. And the Invoker, the Invoker is the last of the divine classes, and the Invoker is the Inquisitor. The only thing stronger than my faith is the fire I use to burn away those who stand against the will of the gods. That is the tagline that they list underneath the class header. It is an Inquisitor, somebody who is for the divine, but they do not heal. No, they burn heretics. All of a sudden, the divinity now has something from every class: a healer, a defender, a striker, and now what is called a controller. Somebody who focuses on AoEs and support, and not support in the sense of they don't do much themselves, but support in the sense of I am setting up for bigger attacks. I am knocking them over. I am hitting them in a way that lowers their defenses. I am making the fight easier for my allies. And the Invoker fills that role, as does the Wizard. The Wizard fills that role by knocking AoEs, by greasing the floor because the grease spell goes back all the way to first edition of D&D, and all this Wizard can control the battlefield. The Barbarian is still around. It is the Primal Striker. You have your Druid as the controller. Now Druid is the class Druid, focuses on polymorph, beast control, turning into a beast, as well as these AoEs and thorny growth coming in out of the grounds to strike enemies down, clouds of poison fog and whatnot. You have the Barbarian as the Primal Striker. You have the Shaman as the Primal Leader, and you have the Warden as the Primal Defender. All of a sudden, you have these roles for every single power source. You have the Martial Defender as the Fighter. You have the Martial Striker in the Ranger. You have the Martial Leader in the Warlord, and you have the Martial Controller in... Do we have one of those? We do. Arcane Archer is back. The Arcane Archer. Something back from the classics. It was a role in the 3.5, and it's returned. You are closer to what Ranger was in 3.5, a half-caster. You cast spells, but you cast them on your arrows, and strike. And when you shoot the enemy, and your spells fly out of your arrows. Maybe you are hitting the ground with acid. Maybe you are hitting the enemy with acid and breaking their armor. Maybe you are doing cool and interesting things. Sorcerer is a striker, whereas Wizard is a controller. Sorcerer is a different class that has a slightly different spell list. This is a different and more dynamic type of class. You are now damage, and I've covered basically all the classes now. So, let's return. What did people think of this? This is new. This is new technology. We're taking the storytelling of books. We're taking the world building of the novels. We're taking what we've learned from game design, what we've learned from both other tabletop games and from the video games and from the acting courses and from the TV show that came out in around 2nd edition and from what people want. We've learned so much about how to make combat more interesting, more dynamic, more focused on doing cool stuff. We've given everyone the ability to do things that are interesting. We still have feats. Every class has a ton of different powers to pick. There's a whole bunch of different races that are available to you, and you can mix and match at your will, and you have so many options to do interesting things. Surely people will love this. No. A lot didn't. Kill your golden calves. Kill them. Destroy them. Why would you shuffle your core resource into your deck? Why would you lock yourself into certain classes in an RPG? Why would you insist on playing Monopoly? Don't you know there's better things out there? Don't you know how much better Settlers of Catan is? Don't you know how much better there is out there? Don't you know how much more interesting it is to play Apples to Apples? Don't you know how much more focused it is to play Spirit Island? Don't you know how much more cooperative it is to play Flamecraft? Don't you know how much more? How better it is? No. We're playing Monopoly tonight. Everybody already knows the rules. We already know how to play Monopoly. We're going to play Monopoly. 4th edition killed too many golden calves. That's its biggest failure. The biggest failure is that they didn't hold back. They didn't change the classes from Final Fantasy 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8. They didn't tone things back and pull back a little bit each time. They didn't go slow. They went fast. They made mistakes, and that mistake was killing the golden calf before the audience was willing to accept that they would die, because the audience had in their mind what they wanted to play, and it was 3.5. Make no mistake, they had what game they wanted already, and that game had 50 splat books out and a dozen base editions and a near infinite amount of user-created content. And buddy, 4th edition came out with 3 books, and they were good books. But people already had 30 D&D 3.5 books. People already had all they needed and all the skills and all the understandings. They had already memorized all the spells. They had already considered everything that they cared to consider. And the core of the game, we've covered earlier, the core of the game is acting. The core of the game is making a character, a personality, a persona, an avatar. And that works in any edition because it's worked without an edition. The idea of role-playing with a character has gone back thousands of years. The idea of imagining yourself as a hero goes back to Gilgamesh, the first recorded works that we've ever written. And you don't need a system for that. So what does the system matter? What does you even need the system for? People ignored 4th edition and went back to 3.5. People ignored 4th edition and split off to other games, to GURPS, to Shadowrun, to branch out to Vampire the Masquerade was very popular in that time as well, which called itself the storyteller system. They build themselves on this idea of making a character you, and many people took that too far, but at a base level, it was about a modern era where you get to play the secret edgy hero, because that was the fantasy. That was what people wanted. That's what people cared about. 4th edition is the most fun that D&D's ever been, but people didn't care. Some did, I did, but a lot of people said, I'm going back and playing 3.5. I'm not playing 4th edition. I already know 3.5. All I wanted 4th edition to be was 3.5 with some updated stuff in it. I didn't want an entirely new system. They killed too many golden calves. That's what they did. From a game design perspective, that's what they did. They did made an amazing game, but had the sheer audacity to label it as Dungeons and Dragons and make it something that people would recognize, and then rug pull them because this game wasn't Dungeons and Dragons to those players. It was, and it was very good, and it was more fun, and you could have combat be interesting. Combat is a beautiful and interesting board game in 4th edition, but it doesn't matter because it was different. It was too different. They didn't slaughter a couple of golden calves. They killed all of them. They took a absolute massacre spree to everything in the game design of the older editions and said, no, this is better. We know more about how to make games now. This is 2008. This is 2008. Fallout 3 is out. Far Cry 2 is out. We have the new set of Tomb Raiders coming out at this time. We have Tales of Vesperia. We have World of Warcraft as an MMO is already getting big major expansions in this. We have a very different landscape of gaming in general. We have learned so much. Go back and play some of the original PlayStation games before we had figured out the idea of putting camera controls on one thumb and movement on the other thumb. That is what it is. We've developed. We know now when you pick up a game, you already know how to control it. If you've played a video game before, you don't even need a tutorial. If you have a controller or like a keyboard with a W, A, S, and D button that have been worn down to the nub, you already know how to play it because we've figured out the best way to make these things, and tabletop gaming wasn't terribly different. "2008. 2008. We've had Army of Darkness, the tabletop game. We've had Dread. We've had Magic Awakening. We have had Spycraft. We've had Call of Cthulhu out for 5 years at this point. We have had so many different tabletop games. We've had Dark Heresy. We've had World of Darkness by Monte Cook, the second edition of D&D developer or designer. This is the same year as Mouse Guard, one of the most thought-forward tabletop RPG systems of its era. And it came out the same year as D&D 4th edition. This is after Paranoia has had multiple revision copies. We have learned how to make better TTRPGs. We've learned how to make better tabletop games. We've learned from our past. We can make things that are more interesting, more dynamic, that have more options, that have more tools, that have a better playstyle. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because people wanted Dungeons and Dragons. It's Dungeons and Dragons, man. It's D&D. It's the staple of everything we know. This is the bedrock of tabletop gaming. This is the game that everybody can walk into and slap down and sit down and know how to play. And all of a sudden, I don't know how to play anymore. Everything's changed. Everything's too different. You see it, right? You see it? They killed too many golden calves. You should kill your golden calves, but you need to be careful. If you change too much, you can't use the same label. Mass Effect Andromeda should not have been called a Mass Effect game, and it would have gone over decently after the patch notes. If Mass Effect Andromeda didn't have the Mass Effect title, people would have been okay with it. They had the audacity to call this game Dungeons and Dragons. But this doesn't feel like Dungeons and Dragons. This doesn't look like Dungeons and Dragons. What are these powers? What do you mean a fighter can do things? What do you mean a fighter has verbs? They're not allowed to have verbs. They just hit things. That's not what they do. They're not allowed to have fun. The fighter just hits things. The monk just punches things. The rogue just stabs things. That's what they do. There was money in tradition. There always has been. There always has been money in conservatism. The idea that I don't want change, I want what's comfortable, is so appealing. But how do you make something new that feels comfortable when you know there's something better that's not comfortable, that you have to learn, that you have to adapt to? How do you push past this and make money off the idea that people don't need to change? How do you make money off the idea that people don't need change? Now is when we're going to get to talk about Pathfinder. Because Pathfinder looked at the landscape and read the room. Pathfinder looked around and said, ooh, no, buddy. No. People wanted 3.5 with some system updates that still feels like 3.5. People didn't want a new game, even if it uses modern designs, even if it uses better and more fair rules. People didn't want a coherent logic. People want Dungeons and Dragons. People want D&D back. People want what they're used to. Let me see if I can find it. I can't find it at the moment. There was actually an ad. An actual published ad that was in gaming stores describing Pathfinder as D&D 3.75. They literally and explicitly name-dropped D&D and said, we are making D&D for you. You wanted D&D. You wanted Dungeons and Dragons, right? Well, friend, buddy, dearest pal, dearest paying consumer, we're making the next D&D. And it's going to be everything that you recognize, everything that you cared about, everything that you remember, everything that you're comfortable with. It's everything that you think it will be. We're even explicitly calling it Dungeons and Dragons 3.75, saying that it is a follow-through of D&D 3.5 as a new edition. They build it on that. They stole Wizards of the Coast's thunder. And their audience. And they didn't waste any time doing it. Pathfinder came out in 2009, a year and change after D&D 4th edition. They saw the backlash, they saw the writing on the wall, and they said, okay, kick down the door, we're publishing this, and we're going to make so much money, and they did. A lot of people wanted this, because they kept in, even though it wasn't Dungeons & Dragons, they kept the golden calves intact. They kept all of those hopes intact. I found it. me see if it comes up. I know it. Hold on. Got it. Sorry for the delay on that. This was literally published out in game stores. 3.5 survives, 3.5 thrives. This is how they sold it. They sold it as a reinvigoration, a recreation of what you knew, of what was safe, of what was comfortable. This is not a new edition of D&D that changes things, that kills everything that you knew and loved, all these golden calves of game design that have been holding back for D&D for years. No, we're going to revel in them. We are going to relish them. We are going to double down on that and make sure that this is the safest version of D&D you could ever hope for. Get ready to strap in and play something that you've played before. 3.5 Part 2. D&D 3.75. D&D, again, the safe version, the version that you know, that you love, that you want. This is the legacy of 4th edition. It changed too much. It's a cautionary tale for game designers. Kill your golden calves, but be very careful you don't piss off your base. Be very careful that you don't hurt the foundation. No matter how good your game is, no matter how much you trust your own game design, be wary. Because if your audience rejects it, you'll find yourself without a paycheck. What does a fighter do? In 1st edition, a fighter hits things with a sword. In 2nd edition, a fighter hits things with a sword. In 3.5, a fighter hits things with a sword. In 4th edition, a fighter can backflip. A fighter can cleave two enemies in half. A fighter can lure an enemy to can use footwork to hit an enemy and lure them into to move into your space while they back up and guide them forward. A fighter can charge somebody and knock them prone. A fighter with a shield can feint with their shield and give you yourself a bonus to your next attack roll as you knock your opponent off target. A fighter can push a target and as you pressure your advance and move forward into them. A Pathfinder fighter can hit someone with a sword. A 5th edition fighter can hit somebody with a sword. Fifth edition backpedaled. They saw the changes and were scared. The suits, because Wizards of the Coast was no longer a plucky little industry who had been owned by people who made cool games. Wizards of the Coast was now a billion-dollar company owned by Hasbro. You couldn't do this. Look at how much money we lost. An entirely new company was developed to steal our sales. We can't have that. We need to backpedal. We need to go back. We need to be safe. We need to make something safe. We need to make something safe. We need to make something old. Expected. We need to give our players what they want. Not the players who actually like this. Not the players who want good game design. Not the players who want this new development. Not the players who are interested and excited for these new considerations. Not the players who like this. We care more about the audience we lost. We are expecting that our players who we lost in the switch to 4th edition to come back. We are expecting the people who played 4th edition to keep on playing it. We're expecting the 4th edition players to be brand loyal and just buy the new version of D&D because they bought the 4th edition, they'll buy the 5th edition. So we are trying to backpedal and not cater to the 4th edition crowd anymore. We are trying to make something new by making something old. We are trying to make D&D great again? That might be too low of a blow, but there is some comparisons between here of saying that we are losing our base by trying to appeal to our opposition. I mean, that's a modern issue, right? We are trying to get people to play our new edition of D&D, not by appealing to the people who want something better, but by trying to appeal to the people who want something worse. We're trying to appeal to the people who liked 3.5 and who are playing Pathfinder to get them back into 5th edition, and trust that the 4th edition purists will follow along with the newest edition. And they've made a lot of money, but a lot of that comes from marketing. They've made more money off of marketing a new version of D&D than they have with the actual design of the game. 5th edition is good. I'm not trying to slander 5th edition with this comparison. It's just an interesting mindset. It's a corporate mindset. It's a very modern corporate mindset of being safe, of playing it safe, of giving people what they expect, of giving people what they know is going to sell, of playing it safe. And now the people we have another decade of game design, of game development, of new editions and new games, and both in the video and the tabletop spheres. We have Thirsty Sword Lesbians, a game that focuses entirely on relationships and how you connect to other people by putting threads on them and by using those threads to draw maneuver socially with them and connect with them. We have Mouse Guard, which came out the same year as 4th edition, as a system that focuses on why you are attacking rather than how you are attacking or what you're attacking. It focuses on motivations and intent. We have all the Powered by Apocalypse systems. We have the new Cyberpunk. We have several renditions of Shadowrun. We still have the storyteller system with all of its vampires. We still have all these other options, but D&D is no longer the new and interesting and well-designed game on the market. D&D is now safe. It's always a good system. 5th edition D&D is always a good system. But it backpedals. It's a backpedal of 4th edition to back to 3.5. Fighters hit things. Casters go back to Vancian magic systems. And monks hit things. Monk is the closest to 4th edition there is, because Monk's key points can be used for spell-like abilities. The ability to Flaming Fist, the ability to strike at a distance with the wind, the ability to do a backflip and do something interesting. But all the other classes have been stripped back down. Ranger is now as bland as it's ever been, and it's a terrible class because of it. And you have all these classes that had a flash of glory, where they were allowed to be fun. You had the fighter with its ability to protect its allies properly, gone. You have the paladin with its ability to divine challenge is now a spell that you have to land. Now you have to land a spell to be able to do that. That is so inconsistent, whereas before it was a pact between you and your god. I am fighting that person. I challenge you. Now they pulled it back. They pulled everything back and made it just another tabletop system. It's no longer fascinating, and Pathfinder realized this and said, oh, 5th edition is stealing our glory. What if we try and grab 4E's old base? And they restructured their action economy. They restructured their ability list so that there's other abilities that martial classes can do. And I don't like the direction they took it, but I think they tried to recapture 4th edition the way that they originally tried to capture 3.5, which is extremely funny to me, but I do not like how they did it. And I think it is fascinating to look at. It is so interesting to look at what they've done and the direction they've gone and the backpedal they did and the beautiful advancements that they made in game design. And it is nothing less than a tragedy that they had to backpedal, that they had to change it back, that they had to go back, because they did. Because it was too much. It was too different. Maybe we'll see a Book of Nine Swords for 5th edition. Maybe we'll see a slow and cautious maneuver forward in the game design of 6th edition. Maybe D&D 1 will start to actually change things for the better? The different? Is it better? Should I say change it for the better? Is it? Is it different or is it better? I feel that it's different and better. I feel that it does something interesting. It makes the combat more like a interesting, dynamic combat encounter that you would find in a novel, in a book, in a TV show, in a movie. But not everybody wanted that. They just wanted their fighter to hit stuff. They wanted their mage to cast spells, not have encounter powers. They wanted what they knew was safe. And so, they got it. And that's where we stand right now. If you are playing... if you are playing Dungeons & Dragons in any edition right now, I will urge you to look at other systems, because there are better ones out there. D&D is always going to be a good system, but there are other systems out there that are going to be better. Because a system that is more specific will more specifically fill your goal than a system that is general. 4th edition fills the specific goal of making combat interesting and dynamic while letting the roleplay aspect and the narrative aspect be handled entirely just by the acting side of it, letting people roleplay how they want, but treating combat into a board game. If you want that, play 4th edition. If you want to focus entirely on social combat and narrative and word style stuff, then you can go into these the vampire systems. You can go into Gumshoe if you want to do mysteries. It is an incredible mystery system. You can go into the Fallout role-playing game. There's several editions out there. You can go into Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which came out a couple of years ago, which fills this role. You can go into Monster Care Squad, which takes the role of protecting and healing these giant monsters that are there to protect the world. There are more systems out there, and I guarantee you, whether it's Lancer or Troika, I guarantee you that one of these other systems is going to be more specific and more successful at conveying what you're trying to do. I guarantee you that you want to look at Cyberpunk, that you want to look at Shadowrun. I guarantee you that you want to look at Starfinder. I guarantee you there are better systems out there to do what you want. Simply because I know that a more specific system is always going to be more correct for a more specific goal. And if you want a more specific system for doing D&D 3.5 and D20 gaming, look up 13th Age. 13th Age is a good game, and it was made by the original designer of 4th edition, Rob Heinsoe. I have a signed copy of it. It's good. But in a lot of ways, it tries to be what Pathfinder is. It's similar to D&D, but leaning on more modern styles of game design that allow for more open access to options without restricting the players, while also making the game more abstract, I guess is a good way of phrasing it, which I think is very good. 13th Age is a good system. It is nothing like D&D 4th edition, but you can see the mindset of implementing more modern game design into a system that they have lost in the transition to 5th edition, that they have lost when Pathfinder became popular, that they have clearly not taken an interest in D&D 1. And I don't know that Hasbro's ever going to go back. I don't know that they're ever going to look back at 4th edition and say, man, we missed an opportunity to push that harder. We missed an opportunity to name that something else and let it be standing on its own. Because forever, for the rest of history, it will be known as the D&D edition that did things different. It'll be known as the D&D that changed things and that people that changed too much. It will be known as the one that people didn't like, not because they didn't like the system, not because it wasn't good, but just because people weren't ready for it. People weren't wanting it. People weren't willing to accept a new system. People didn't want that many golden calves slaughtered. thank you for listening. I will be now headed over to the server for our community night. Wait, if it's Tuesday, I'm pretty sure it is. Yep, it is. I hope to see you there, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening. Be sure to like the video, be sure to subscribe, be sure to take care of yourself, get some water, get some food, and be sure to kiss your dog. I hope that you have a wonderful evening. Good night.